Welcome back, my friends. My name's Gareth. This is Tech Check. This week, another PC build, but this week more budget orientated. So I've got 3 reasons to stick around. Number 1, this is going to be Intel, not AMD. If you've been watching all the latest builds, they've always been on the AMD side of the fence. This time, I thought we'd go blue, we'd go Intel. Second reason, as we said, it's budget orientated, so you're going to be able to build this for around £650 here in the UK. We've not gone for all second-hand parts or anything like that. You'll see the majority of the parts are all brand new, with the exception of the graphics card. So £650, really strong foundation for a good gaming PC. And third reason, this is going to be really easy to upgrade as and when these graphics cards become more readily available and then prices start to drop. So we're going to do a full step-by-step build. Stick around. If you enjoy the content, smash that subscriber button, leave a big fat thumbs up. Let's get building. So as we always do, guys, we're going to have a quick rundown of all the parts. If you're interested in any of these, links will be down below in the description. But with that being said, let's start off with the graphics card. And this is the 1060 6GB from Asus. Fantastic budget GPU, guys. 1080p. Powerhouse, little monster of a graphics card. Fantastic when it first came out, and like I said, you're going to still get 60 FPS at 1080p at medium to high settings in most AAA games. If you want to push them to competitive settings, then you can push that up to around 100 FPS, tinkering it here and there. For motherboard, we've gone for this MSI Torpedo B560. Fantastic value for money, guys. Really good bang for buck motherboard, this, in terms of 10th gen and 11th gen CPUs, and it's got all the usual connectivity such as your RGB, Mystic Light, and then it's got USB-C, it's got 2.5 gig LAN, it's got 2 M.2 or NVMe slots as well. So if you're looking for fast storage and connectivity, this has kind of got you covered. That brings us nicely onto our CPU, and this time round, guys, we've gone for Intel's 10500. Not the K version, not the KF, but just the 10500. You may be asking, why didn't we go for the 10400, save a little bit of money? Well, the reason is really simple. We got an absolutely stunning deal on this 10500, and between a 104, and 600, there is minuscule of difference when it comes down to gaming. The higher base clock on the 10600 edges out an extra little bit of performance, but I would advise if you can pick up a 104, 105, 10600 for the best value, go with that one. You'll notice very minuscule difference. For RAM, we've gone for this Patriot Viper RGB, 16 gigs worth of RAM. It's 3600 megahertz, slightly OC here, to be honest. 3200 would have been absolutely fine, and even 3000 would have been good as well. So happy with this. Again, fantastic deal. We picked it up on Black Friday 4 or 5 weeks ago, so I'm actually using it in this build here. Adds a bit of RGB, bit of bling, and hopefully give us that little bit more performance from that high megahertz. In terms of power supply, we've gone for Nzxt C650. Fully modular gold power supply, guys. Going to be fantastic, cutting down the cable clutter and giving us that ultra sleek finish. Going that modern look again, we've gone for Samsung's 970 EVO. Now this is a 1TB SSD or NVMe drive, guys. Going to give us really quick transfer speeds up to 3,500 megabytes per second. So we're going to have one drive in here, maybe a little lacking, but again, with the 2 slots on this Torpedo board, it gives us room for expansion at a later date when we've got a bit more of that cache. In terms of cooling, guys, we've gone for this V5 Ventru cooler. Absolutely fantastic cooler, guys. If you've not checked out the review we did 3 or 4 weeks ago, go and check that out. I'll leave that up there as a card. It's really good bang for buck here, guys. Fantastic value. Around £30, and I picked up 4 or 5 of these back in the Black Friday deals. So if you're looking for decent performance, good aesthetics, look no further. This has got you covered. And last but not least, guys, is our case of choice. This is the Corsair Carbide Spec Delta RGB. Bit of a mouthful, but essentially it comes with 3 RGB addressable fans at the front. It's got a perforated front panel here, so the airflow is not amazing, but it's by no means the worst. It's got a full glass tempered side panel, and it's got a full PSU shroud as well. So it should allow us to build a relatively smart and sleek looking PC whilst maintaining some really good aesthetics. So as we say, guys, go ahead and take out your motherboard, clear away everything else that you may have because it's not necessary at this point. Only have out what you're actually going to need, therefore much cleaner, much easier to see what you're actually going to need as well. So go ahead, take out your motherboard. You can remove it from the anti-static bag. And in this case, we're not going to need any of the additional hardware that's in this box, guys, like our SATA data cables. The only thing that we are going to require is our M.2 screw. So now that we've got our motherboard on top of our motherboard box, guys, we can undo the retention arm. We can open up the socket. And what we can do is we can take out our CPU. When we're undoing these CPU, guys, just be slightly careful. It's not as important as when you're actually undoing an AMD chip because the actual pins are in the socket, not on the actual CPU itself. But it doesn't harm, just to be careful. So go ahead and take out your CPU. Try and keep your fingers off of the top of the IHS, which is this part at the top, just up here. And what we're looking to do is match the triangle on the CPU with the triangle on the socket. We can go ahead and we can lower this into place. Like so. And then what we can do is pull back the socket, place it down, and then pull down the retention arm. And what you will see is this cover will come out. You want to keep hold of this in case you plan on actually selling your motherboard or actually storing it just to actually protect those CPU pins in that socket. Moving on to our RAM, guys. So as we said previously, this is Patriot Viper 3600 MHz, C18, 16 gig kit, RGB, beautiful. So before we actually go ahead and install these DIMMs of RAM, guys, we just want to make sure that we are populating them in the correct DIMM slot. So we go ahead and we open all of our little tabs on our DIMM slots. And as you can see here, some are blue and some are grey. There's a little indicator to the left hand side here of the different channels and which ones you need to populate first if you've only got 2 sticks of RAM. And in this instance, we want to be populating the blue slots, which is B2 and A2. Okay. So second thing to note is there's a little notch on this RAM stick here. We need to match that notch there with the notch which is on the DIMM slot itself. So go ahead and slide them into place. And once they're actually there, what we need to do is apply firm pressure until you hear a click. There we go. And we can do the same thing with the next DIMM. And they are successfully in place. So next up, guys, is our storage drive. And in this case, it's our only storage drive, but it's going to be an absolutely fantastic one. It's the 970 Evo Plus. It's a 1 terabyte drive and it's an NVMe drive. So speeds up to around 3,500 megabytes per second. So we're going to have ultra fast Windows boot drive and loads of fast storage with plenty of room for upgradability down the line as well. So what we need first of all is our screw and our standoff out of our motherboard box. We also need our NVMe or M.2 drive as well. And what we want to do, guys, is go ahead and install this on the top NVMe or M.2 slot possible on your motherboard. So we can do that by placing it at a slight angle and just slotting it into place. And as you can see, it's flopping around a little bit. Now there is, on this particular motherboard, a nice little foam standoff here. But what we're wanting to do is place that back in. And essentially, we need to make sure that we install our standoff in the correct position. And as you can see here, it's for this screw hole here. So we can take that out, place it down. We can take our standoff and our screw. And it's at this point where you need to make sure that you're quite steady with regards to your hands because it's not that big. So we can go ahead and install our standoff. So now that we've got a standoff in place, we can go ahead and put our M.2 drive back in. And now you can see we've got something to screw into. So essentially, guys, you want a tiny little screwdriver that can fit this tiny little screw here. something that's magnetic is going to really help you out. Now, one thing I've noticed, guys, is there is no heatsink for our NVMe drive on the top, but there is one on this second drive down. And I was mistaken, guys, this actual Torpedo board has 3 slots, so even more room for expandability and extra storage. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to undo this screw here, and we'll take that out, so our NVMe drive will flip up. I'm going to see if we can nick this heatsink off of the second drive here, and we can replace that over the top of our actual drive. We should be able to do this. Yeah, we can. Now, before we actually install this drive, guys, we do need to remove this film on the back of this heatsink, so we benefit from the additional cooling. So we can go ahead and place that into position. And then what we should be able to do is quite nicely just screw this down, and it should keep everything nicely in place. So there we have it, guys. We've got our CPU nicely installed. We've got our 2 sticks of RAM in the correct slots and then nicely and seated correctly. We've got our 970 EVO 1TB drive on our top M.2 drive. So hopefully you followed along, not incurred too many problems, and up to this point, we're all good. So the next step is to install our CPU cooler, which is this Ventro V5. And we'll go ahead and do that now. So go ahead, guys, and take out your cooler and all of the fittings for your actual cooler itself. So inside the box, guys, we've got our 120mm RGB fan. We've got our tower cooler and fin stack, which is there. We've got our Intel back bracket, which is there. We've got our mounting hardware for Intel, mounting hardware for AMD, our 4 screws that's going to be required to connect our fin stack to our mounting hardware, our clips for our fan, and then they also include some thermal paste as well. So we'll get rid of the AMD mounting hardware, and we can remove the fan for the time being. But on the fan itself, it does have a 4-pin PWM header, and then it has got a 3-pin 5-volt addressable header that can be connected to your motherboard as well. So really good. You can run the RGB off of your motherboard software. So putting that to one side, the first thing that we want to do is we want to take our Intel back bracket, which is here. Now, what we can do is we can remove this film, and this is really going to help us out because this allows then this bracket to attach to the back of the motherboard, and it doesn't move around or fall out. It keeps it in place for you. All we've got to do is line up the 4 holes on the back of the actual motherboard with the 4 prongs on the back of the plate here. So we can do that by just lining them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, cool. And then we can press down, and that is not going to move anywhere now. So when we turn this around and we turn it upside down, essentially that's not going to be falling out the bottom, and you've got something stable to screw into. So the next step, guys, is remove your 2 brackets for your Intel mounting hardware, and we're wanting to install these on either side of the actual fin stack itself. So remove 4 screws, and then what we can do is place this inside here, and we can just screw them into place. So now that we've gone ahead and installed our hardware, guys, utilizing the 4 screws, very straightforward. All we're going to do is match these 4 screws here with these 4 holes on the actual socket. Now it will go on as simply like that, no problems at all. Now what you will notice is these may not all line up, and you can alter these slightly by about 4 or 5 mils just to cater for the different socket types. So 1151, 1200, so on, so on. So if they don't actually line up, just give them a slight move around just to ensure that they all line up nicely with these holes here. Okay. Now, before we actually go ahead and install this, we need to remove this film like so, and we can put that down. And what we're going to do is we're going to utilize the thermal paste that Ventro included, and we're going to put a pea-sized shape sock in the middle of the CPU, or an X, or a few dots. You can play noughts and crosses if you like, as long as it's got an adequate amount on. It's not going to cause too much mess. Too much is always better than too little. So we'll go ahead and install some CPU paste. There's a decent amount in the middle there, and we can go ahead and install our CPU cooler. Now what you will notice is there is a V on this particular cooler. So what you don't want to do is mount it like that because it's going to look upside down. So make sure that you've got it orientated the correct way. We can then go ahead and place in the screws. And as we said previously, they might not 100% line up perfectly. So just go ahead and slightly change them until they actually meet the screw holes itself. There we go. I think we're in. And then what we can do is go ahead and in a crisscross format, do a few turns on one side and then come to this side and do a few turns on this side to get it going. And then once you've got this one going, you can go to this side and then you can go to this side until a point where you figure it's getting tighter, and you can't do it too much more without too much force because you don't want too much clamping pressure, because that can be sometimes just as bad as it being not as tight enough. So you'll see now, guys, our CPU cooler is firmly into place. So as we mentioned previously, guys, 5-volt addressable header that can go to one of our motherboard headers. You do want to make sure that it is a 5-volt addressable header, so that's a 3-pin J Rainbow 2. Don't put it onto a J Rainbow 1 because they're 12-volt headers. You've got a JRGB 2 and a JRGB 1 down here as well. So on this particular motherboard, you've got 2 5-volt headers, which is fantastic. So we'll end up putting it onto this header up here. What we also want to enable is the 4-pin PWM header. We want to make sure that that is attached to our CPU header as well. And as you can see, that is just located here. So there you go, guys. I've just connected our PWM fan cable to our CPU header on our motherboard. We can then go ahead and connect our 5-volt addressable header by just matching up the 2 and the 1. So it's 2 and then 1. So we can go ahead and connect those as well. So now that we've got our CPU header connection and we've got our 5-volt addressable header connection, last thing to take note of here, guys, is fan orientation. We want to make sure that we attach our fan on this side of the actual cooler itself. Therefore, it's pushing cool air through the actual fin stack, and when the motherboard's orientated into the case, this hotter air can be exhausted out of the rear exhaust fan. All we're looking to do is hook the bottom side of each fan, like so. We can just put that on the side of the actual cooler and we can pull it round the side and hook it into place like so. I'll do the same on this side. So again, just hook it into position at the top and at the bottom like that. And then all we're going to do is pull it round the side, and now that CPU cooler is nicely in position. Now that we've got our CPU cooler installed, we can move this to one side and turn our attention to our actual case. So onto the case, guys, and as we said previously, really nice budget case this. Really nice aesthetics with the glass panel, perforated front panel as well. Not the best for should we say airflow, but definitely not the worst. Really straightforward. There's a little clip underneath that does take a little bit of force to pull off. There we go. I always think that that's going to fly out. But again, as we said, it's got these perforations here to allow this front intake fans to pull air at the top and bottom. That then reveals these 3 RGB fans at the front. So they're all in intake position. So it's going to push lots of nice, fresh, cool air into that case through those limited holes. So just be aware of that. Whilst it's not amazing airflow, it's definitely not going to suffocate your system or anything like that. In terms of the side panel, it's held on by these 4 screws. Now, I'm not a huge fan of these, but that being said, I don't think it's only the case because now that they've come out with these fancy dancy hinges, it makes this a little bit more archaic. And not only that, I always find that if you're not careful, what can happen is these can slip off of these rubbers and end up smashing your glass side panel. So do take care when you're actually taking these off. It does also come with some filters, which are magnetic at the top and at the bottom for your power supply as well, which is pretty nice. And as we said previously, it has got a full length PSU shroud. So regardless of your PSU, if you're going more budget or if it's not color orientated, the same as this in black, don't worry, do not fear. It's away in the back. No one's ever going to see it. So in terms of radiator capacity, you can fit a 360mm cooler at the front, but a max of a 240 cooler at the top. 120mm fan at the rear, which we're going to remove, just a standard black fan. It's not RGB, but not a problem there. What you do get inside is you do get a really nice big cutout for the back of your motherboard. You've got all integrated standoffs for your motherboard, which can fit either ITX, ATX, and you also get these really nice grommets. So overall, a really nice little case, guys. Nice in terms of aesthetics, going to perform reasonably well. As you can see, all the RGB fans are already connected in here. They do only come with 3-pin connectors as well, so just be aware of that. So you will need to make sure that you control those in the BIOS. And in terms of front I/O, you've got HD audio and a USB 3 along with your power reset button and normal LED lights. So nothing too bad there either. The one thing that I do like is the cutout down the bottom here for the GPU or PCIe power cable for our graphics card. It's going to make it much easier to actually connect that and leave a cleaner aesthetic there also. So we'll remove this back fan, and then I think the first order is we'll go ahead and install our 2 exhaust fans at the top and our 1 rear exhaust fan at the back. We'll pull all of these cables through to the back, tidy them up slightly, and hopefully we'll be in a better position to get our motherboard installed. One thing I did forget to mention, guys, is you can actually release these screws at the bottom down here for the actual 3.5-inch drive. And if you didn't want to actually remove the drive in total, what you can do is remove those 2 screws on the right hand side, like so, and undo the ones on the left hand side. And what you will see is we will have the option to actually slide this drive bay across like this. So you should be able to then have a little more room for the actual power supply if you don't want to actually remove this in total. So now we've got a lot more play, and I would say somewhere around a good 6 centimeters, something like that, which is going to be plenty for us. So I'll go ahead now and reinstall this. There we go. So as you can see now, guys, at the bottom, we've gained nearly, we've gained a couple of inches basically with regards to the additional space for the power supply, which is a bonus. So talking about the other 3 fans that we're going to put into this build, guys, these are ML120s. So it's a magnet levitating fan, so it creates quite a lot of high pressure. So what we are going to be able to do is we're going to be able to get rid of a lot of that hot air quite fast. And because it's got a 4-pin PWM connection, we're going to be able to control it. We're going to be able to control this in the iCUE software as well. So first of all, guys, we want it as an exhaust fan, and we also want to make sure that our fan is coming off of this side of the cable. So when we put it into the case, it's very easy to cable manage as well. So we'll go ahead, we'll install the 4 screws and put the fan back in the exhaust position. There we go, nicely done. Right, fantastic. So we've got the cable coming out of the back side, which is going to make it really easy for us to cable manage. We can go ahead and we can pop those through. There we go, fantastic. Right, what we're going to do now, guys, is go ahead and install the top 2 exhaust fans, doing the exact same thing, placing them inside the actual case, screwing from outside the case and making sure they're in an exhaust configuration. If your motherboard does not have an integrated I/O shield, then this is the exact time now that you need to go ahead and place that inside of your case. What you don't want to do is go ahead and install your motherboard and then realize that you need to put your I/O shield in and you've got to take everything back out. Now, as we said previously, this has already got the integrated standoffs. So all we need to do is lower the motherboard into place, ensuring that the motherboard holes line up with the standoffs. And then what we can do is go ahead and utilize 9 of these screws and secure it into place. So we'll go ahead and lower this down. Just be vitally careful here, guys. It is going to be tight, so just be wary of that. Very tight. We may have dropped a boo-boo here. One thing to note here then, guys, is because we've installed the top 2 fans before installing the motherboard, because the motherboard is such a tight fit, we need to take out these top 2 fans in order to obviously allow the motherboard to slot into position. So we'll take out this 8 screws of the top fans, we'll just pull them out, we'll lower the motherboard into position. I'll do that now. I should really edit these bits out, shouldn't I? But then again, it's the same problem for everybody. So guys, I would rather me do it and then you not have the problem and learn from my mistakes. Now that we've corrected our mistake, guys, and we've removed those 2 top fans, let's go ahead and drop in the motherboard. So the main thing we've got to take into consideration here, guys, is just ensuring that our IO shield lines up with the back of the case and all of our standoffs line up with our screw holes. So now that our motherboard is nicely and secure, it's all lining up with the screw holes of the standoffs, we can go ahead and then we can install 9 of these particular screws just here. You do want to ensure that these screws are the ones that you utilize, because you don't want to use or cause any harm to your motherboard, potentially cracking it or anything like that. And you want to make good use of the grounding pins on the actual motherboard itself. So make sure you are using the correct screws. What I think I'm going to do also is my wife also purchased one of these wow sticks and electric screwdriver. Not for taking out fans or anything like that, but comes in real handy when you've got small screws that don't need to be actually tightened really tight. Might just give this a go, and then I'm going to potentially do a review on this, give you my opinion on it, because it looks really nice. Does it perform good? Let's give it a whirl. I like it, especially for these light screws. Comes in real handy because it's magnetic. I could get used to this. So there we are, guys. Starting to look really, really nice. What we can do is we can start tidying up some of these cables at the top here. Then we'll turn it over because we've got to make some of them RGB connections, and we'll start tidying the cables at the back as well. There we go. All of that can be pulled through, and then we can tidy this up at a later stage. I'll tell you what though, it's not looking too bad. Let's get our 2 fans reinstalled at the top. So now that we've got everything installed, guys, our 2 top fans as exhaust, our rear fan as exhaust, and our motherboard nicely installed. And then we've sorted the cables out at the top and pushed them to through to the rear of the case. So front view is starting to look rather special for this budget PC. So really, really pleased with regards to the progress so far. Let's turn it round. Let's install the lighting node. Let's make some of these RGB connections, and then we can start pushing through our front IO to the front of the case, and we can go ahead and connect that to the motherboard. So what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to install this lighting node, which is here. So this is one of Corsair's lighting nodes. Essentially, it normally comes in the back of a Corsair case, and you can replace it with a Commander Pro or a Commander Core or something like that. So essentially, this only controls the actual RGB, it doesn't power the fans or control the PWMs. So what we're going to do is we're just going to stick on the back of this particular lighting node here a little bit of double-sided adhesive tape. There's one, and then we've got another one which is at the back here. Number 2, which is there. Fantastic. And then what we're going to do, guys, is we are going to apply that to this SSD drive, which is just here. Now, I could remove the drive and stick it directly to the back of the motherboard tray, but again, what I want to be able to do is if I want to be able to remove this easily, I can just take it out and it's dead straightforward. This is going to be powered via SATA power, and it's going to connect via a USB 2 connection on our motherboard as well. So we have two fans at the top, which are these two here, and then we've got our rear exhaust fan as well. So as we said previously, in order for this to work correctly with RGB, you need to make sure that it's all wired up correctly. Now, it is going to be a little weird because the front three fans are not Corsair's standard connectors, so they are 5-volt addressable headers. So we are going to have a play around with MSI Mystic Light and Corsair to see if we can find some RGB that's going to work all together if we're not going to have it as a standard one color. So essentially we need to make sure that we put number one, fan 1 into port 1. We then need to look for fan 2. So that's the PWM. Fan 2 is this one here. So we can attach that one. And then number 3 is this one just here. So that is our 3 fans, all RGBs connection to the actual hub itself. What we need to do then is attach our 3 PWM headers or fan cables to the headers on our motherboard. Now, I haven't checked how many headers we have got, but essentially we're going to require 3 for these fans and then 3 for these fans. Now, what I have got is I've got a 3-way splitter, which I'm going to connect these 3 fans, i.e. the DC fans, to this 3-pin splitter. And then that's very straightforward. We can just clip them into place like so. There we go. And then now, like our RGB, all we have got is essentially 3 fans on a splitter for our RGB and 3 fans that's going to be powered by 1 PWM. So that is essentially all our front 3 fans by these 2 connections. Even though there is a shed load of cables, it's just 2 connections. 1 5-volt, 1 PWM header. So we can put them to one side and I can do them a little bit later on. We'll do the front I/O afterwards as well. But essentially what we've got then is we've got 3 other cables that we need to connect to our headers on our motherboard, PWMs. So it'll be fan control 1, fan control 2, fan controller 3. So what we'll do is we'll have a look at how many headers we've got on the motherboard. We need a minimum of 4. If not, we need to then use splitter cables for at least these 2, and then we'll be able to use a double splitter. I haven't got another triple splitter, which would have been nice because then I would have only needed 2 PWM headers on the motherboard. But let's have a look at that now, and then we can have a look at what we need. So we've got system fan 1, which is here. We've got system fan 2, which is just here. 3, which is just here. Number 4, which is here. 5, which is here. And then we have got a pump header, which is up here as well. So I'm going to actually connect the triple one to, I think, this pump header up here. If not, this one here, because it's much cleaner. And then we'll use all of these ones down the bottom for our other 3 fans. There we go. So that's our top 3 fans, and I've pushed them into the hard drive bay just to get them out of the way. Then we want our 3-pin splitter for our RGB. Right, that's more of these cables. We can just tidy these up by pushing these ones into the next bit down. Just again to get them out the way. We won't leave it like this, guys. I mean, you could if you really wanted to and weren't bothered about it. It isn't a glass side panel, so you could do that if you really didn't care about it. But seeing as I want it to not be the Mona Lisa back here, but I want it to at least be managed correctly. Right, so that now leaves us with the other 3 PWM connections, which are these 3 here. And then what we can do is we can then see how much cable slack we've got, and then we can tidy the rest of these cables up. Oh, that wasn't too bad at all. And like I said, guys, all I've done is those 4 system header fan headers at the bottom of the motherboard. I've just connected them down there. So there's one of them just down here. And then number 2 number 3. So these 3 fans, first one here, second one here, third one just up here. As we said previously, our 5-volt header is attached for our CPU cooler, and then we have our other one which is down here in the bottom left, doing these front 3 fans down here as well. So not too shabby, as they say. Right, so what we'll do now is we will push through our other front I/O to get those out of the way, and then I'll cable manage this. Nobody wants to see that, so I'll do that behind the scenes, and hopefully when we come back I'll push these through to the relevant places. We can make these connections and it will look a lot tidier than what it does at the minute. So there we go, guys, just a quick snippet of what we've managed to do at the back. Nothing spectacular by any stretch of the imagination, but we've managed to tidy it up. So we've got our 1, 2, 3 RGB connections, and that's just for this top 2 and rear fan up there. We've then got our SATA power connector that's going to control this lighting node, and then the only cable that we haven't pushed through, because I don't want to push that through and then can't get the power supply in, is the HD audio. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the power supply, and we'll show you which cables we're going to require and how to install it. So the power supply that we're going to be using is from Nzxt. It's the C650 fully modular power supply, all in black, and it's a gold rated power supply as well, guys. So really good power supplies from Nzxt. So go ahead, take out your power supply and we'll have a look at the cables. Nzxt includes all the cables in that nice zip up bag as well. So what I would say is 650 watt power supply, as we said previously, really good connectivity, really nice quiet fan. And it has got a fan mode or a 0 fan mode on the back here as well. In terms of cables, we've got our 24 pin. We've got our CPU or EPS power cable. We've got our SATA power cable. And then we've got our PCIe cable for our graphics card that we're going to power that as well. The only other thing that you're going to require is the 4 screws to secure it into the actual case itself. So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead, connect the cables, and then we'll install it into the bottom of the case. So our 24 pin, we've got 2 connections which we need to make on the top of this power supply. Just push those ones in until you hear a click. Our EPS power cable, we've got one that says PSU and then one that says CPU. So make sure that you plug the 8 pin into the power supply, and again we can push that one in. We want to utilize our SATA power cables because we've only got one SATA connection because we're not using any 3.5-inch drives or 2.5-inch drives. But what we do need is to be able to power our lighting node. So we need one of these cables as well. So what this needs to do is we need to push this into where it says peripheral or SATA. Fantastic. And then last but not least is our graphics card or PCIe power cable for our graphics card. Again, very nicely actually tells us where we need to put this. So PSU, again, CPU can go in here, PCIe can go in these ones just here. And that's it. So only these 4 cables, guys. Last thing to note before we do go ahead and actually install this into the case is the fan is obviously on the bottom here. Now, what I would say to you is if you have a vent or should we say a filter at the bottom of your case, then ideally you want to be putting this with the fan facing downwards. In some cases you do have vents at the top, so it wouldn't make too much of a difference, but what we don't want to do is throttle it or cause any additional heat. So all we've got to do now is slide this in from the side like so. Make sure it pushes all the way to the end and sits on the actual rubber foam. And then what we can do is go ahead and secure it in place with the 4 screws to keep it in place. And there we have it. Really nicely installed. No problems, really easy. So our first and only SATA power connection is this one for our lighting node. So we can go ahead and connect that. There we go. And then what we can do with the excess, guys, is just push it into the bottom as well. Next thing I just want to tackle is, now that we've got our power supply in, I want to push this HD audio cable up and through the slot at the bottom. There we go. Right, that will allow us to figure out how we're going to cable manage that. The next one is our 24 pin. We want to push that through and round the front of the case. We can tidy everything up once we've figured out how much slack we've got and which tie points we're going to use. And then the last cable is our graphics card cable, and that wants to be pushed down here and through the grommet in the actual PSU cover. And then we can pull that through at the front. And our EPS power cable for our CPU just disappeared on me. We need to push that all the way up here and through the grommet at the top. There we go. That can go through there. And now we've got some understanding, guys, of what cable we've got left and where we're actually going to route these as well. So before we tie anything down, the best and easiest thing to do, guys, is to flip it over and actually make the connections on the actual motherboard. And then once you've got it all connected, we can pull all the excess back through and then we can start strapping it down. I like to get the biggest cables out of the way first, and we always start with the 24 pin. So we push that into this connector here. There we go. And then again, we can push the excess back through. We've got our USB type 3, which is here. So you will notice, guys, there is a notch on the top of this USB connector. And again, there is a little cutout on the actual USB 3 header on the motherboard. You just want to be really careful when you put this in here, guys, because I've seen it or heard of it so many times where people bend these pins and then they can't actually make the connection. So take your time here. Fantastic, that's that one. We've got our USB 2 connection from our lighting node so that we can control these particular fans in iCUE in the software. That needs to go down to our USB 2 header, which is just down here. We've got 2 of those. What you will see is you've got 4 pins on the top and then a blank, and then 5 pins on the bottom. You need to make sure that the blank is in the correct spot by looking at the connection on the motherboard. Now the connection on the motherboard states that the blank is in the bottom right hand corner. So if we orientate that, we can push that on. Next one is our HD audio. That always goes in the bottom left hand corner of your motherboard, guys. And again, very much like our USB 2, you will see that there is 5 pins on the top, 3 pins, a blank, and then a pin. Again, you just need to match that blank with the orientation on the actual motherboard. Fantastic. So the next cable, guys, is going to be our CPU or EPS power cable. Now, this is 2 4-pin connections. You need to push these both together, and you'll see that we've got, may not see, but I'll try and do my absolute best to be able to show you. Down there at the bottom left-hand corner, we have got an 8-pin connection and then a 4-pin connection. We're only going to be connecting the 8-pin. We don't plan on overclocking this CPU, and if we did, unless you've got something like an 8-core, 10-core, 16-core, something like that, you'll be absolutely fine with an 8-pin connection. Both in, nice, clicked into place, which is nice. So very finicky there, guys. And a couple of ways to get around that is to basically install your 8-pin EPS cable before you actually install either your radiator or your actual fan at the top of your case, therefore giving you a lot more room. As you can see, I've rubbed up my knuckles on the side of this particular fin stack because it was so tight. There we are, and that just pushes really, really nicely from the top all the way down the side of the case, and then we can either zip tie it in place there or it's nice and secure already. And then the last connections, guys, are the resets, power switch, power LED, positive and negative. Now, what I would say, guys, at all occasions, even though there is a little matrix on the actual motherboard just here, what I would say is consult your motherboard, because each and every one is slightly different. What you will find on normal occasions is your power switches at the top, and directly below it, you've got your reset switch. And to the left on the top row, your power positive and negative are on the right and left. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we will attach our reset switch first. And one other thing to note here, guys, a little tip, is on the back of the actual connections, you will see a little triangle, and that triangle indicates a positive. So do make sure that when you are connecting these, you have got the positive in the correct place, because if not, when you come to press that power button, you may find that nothing actually works. So we'll start with our reset switch first, guys, and that goes on the bottom. And you want to make sure that the positive is on the right hand side. So you want to be installing it where you can actually see the reset switch. There we go. And then we want the positive on the left hand side for our power switch, just slightly above it, like so. And then we have our positive and negative LEDs. So we want our negative LED first, and then our positive LED to the left of it. Now, I like to do both of these together because they are really small connections. So essentially, all we need to make sure is that our negative is on one side and our positive is on the other. And then we can push those on the top next to the power switch and slide them both on. There we go. So that's everything nicely installed. So as you can see there, guys, power switch on the top row, positive LED on the left, and then the negative on the right. And then directly below the power switch, we've got our reset switch. We can then push our excess through to the back of the case. And I don't think there's any need to go any further than there, guys. We're not creating the Mona Lisa back here. As we said, it's not got a glass back panel or anything like that. Everything's nice and secure. Nothing's going to be falling around. And we know that the back panel is going to fit on. So moving on to the bit that everybody gets excited about, and that's the graphics card. Before we actually go ahead and install the graphics card, we need to actually remove the PCIe brackets at the back to enable us to install it. Now, with most 2-slot cards, it's slot number 2 and number 3. So go ahead and remove these 2 PCIe brackets. Normally these fall out. It's not done it. There's number 1. And number 2. Oh, there we go. I knew it was too good to be true. Right, now that we've done that, guys, last thing to make sure before we do install it is open our PCIe lane by pushing open the slot, and then we can get hold of our graphics card. So now that we've got our prized possession, guys, and good news, as of from today, prices are starting to come down. Cryptocurrencies kind of come down quite a lot. It's down about 35% at this moment in time. Ethereum's really down. That has a knock-on effect on these bad boys here. So it's good news for us all around. So I have started to see over the last couple of days much more of these graphics cards become more readily available, not only on eBay, but on Facebook Marketplace and on a number of other selling sites as well. So keep your eyes peeled, be making sure that you are going A, picking them up, B, checking them out, and C, making sure they're working. With that being said, guys, GTX1060 6GB card, going to be fantastic in 1080p at really nice frames, anywhere between 1600 FPS, depending on the game and the settings and quality that you put and apply. But overall, a really nice card. What really frustrates me is when you start seeing £700, £800, £900 computers and they've got something like a 950 or a 960 or a 970 and something like that. And that's no knock on those cards whatsoever. It's just the times that we see ourselves. This I wanted to be slightly different. I would have loved to have gone for a 1660, but it just pushed the market price out too much, and I wanted this to be something that was really affordable, really upgradable, and I think this card hits the nail on the head. So when we go to install this card, make sure that we line our PCIe slot up with our graphics card, and all we're looking for, guys, is once we've actually lined it up is a click like that. What we can do now, guys, is go ahead and reinstall our 2 screws that we removed with our brackets. We can then go ahead and attach our 8-pin PCIe power cable. Then we can push the excess cable back through the bottom of this PSU shroud and tidy up the excess cable as well. So let's go for the first test, guys. Again, we're not looking for a post here, even though I have no doubt that we will hit a post. I just want to have a look at the aesthetics of it, and then we'll load on Windows, and hopefully we'll do a couple of tests on some games. We might chuck on some Apex, some PUBG, and potentially a bit of Warzone if I can be bothered to download that whole 100 or 200 gigs or however big it is now. But right, flick it on. Do we have any power? We've got a light on the GPU, which is good. Right, power, action. Positive, which is good. But we'll turn this off. We'll get Windows loaded on and we'll get it all synced up as it should do. And then we'll potentially turn off or remove this glass panel so I can give you a few more better looks at it. And then we'll finish off with a bit of a montage, some FPS scores with this 10500 and 1060. And some would say a few moments later, but it's not been a few moments, guys. It's been a couple of hours. I've been for a shower. I've got stressed out, and I'll tell you why. So the main reason why, guys, was, can you remember that NVMe drive that we installed on the top M.2 lane? Well, it turns out when we came to install Windows that BIOS did not recognize any NVMe drive whatsoever. As far as BIOS was concerned, nothing was installed. I thought this is a bit funny. So I swap it out for a Sabrent drive. That didn't find it. I then swap it out for a 980 Pro. That didn't find it. So I'm starting to think there's a bit of a pattern here. So that was the point where I went, enough's enough. I'm going to go and have a break, chill for a couple of hours, and then I'm going to come back and we'll have a look at it. So turns out, after a bit of digging, essentially that top M.2 drive is only compatible when you have an 11th gen CPU installed. It makes sense as it's PCIe 4.0, even though we're only using a Gen 3 drive, it's not compatible. So do not put your Gen 3 or Gen 4 drive in there unless you've got an 11th gen CPU installed in the socket. So that was the first problem. The second problem was we got Windows installed, absolutely everything fine after we got the drive sorted. But when we turned it on, you saw originally, we got 3 colours on the front, 3 different colours here. The RAM was a different colour, the CPU was a different colour. We had rainbow puke everywhere. Well, it turns out that after installing iQOO, the top 3 or top 2 in the rear fan, all good, no problem at all. Then I had to download Mystic Light because we've got the front 3 connected via a 12 volt header to the motherboard, and it's an MSI motherboard, so therefore we're using Mystic Light. So I download that. I then managed to get the front 3 fans all good. We then had to control and change this particular fan because that's controlled, or the CPU cooler is controlled via a 5 volt addressable header to the motherboard. So we then sync that up to Mystic Light, and that's good. But if you can remember, this Patriot RAM was also a different colour, and the graphics card was also a different colour as well. So in order to rectify that, I actually had to download Asus Aura, so a third piece of RGB software, just to make sure that everything was in sync. Now, after all said and done, and a few hairy moments of me losing my patience, I have managed to get it all synced up. Now, that's based on a static colour. Now, you can go through and add some blinking effects or colour changing effects or rainbow effects if you wish to do so, but it's going to take a little bit of patience in order to press it at the right time on the right colours, etc, etc. So, a bit of advice. If you are going to be building a system that is primarily RGB controlled, I would always advise to make sure that it's Corsair and Asus because they work really nicely together, or you're going to be using MSI and whatever it may be, so that you've only got a minimum or maximum of one piece of RGB software running at any one time. But the moaning and groaning out the way, I'm absolutely over the moon because we've used some really, really nice parts. We've not scrimped and scraped. The only reused part is the CPU and the graphics card, and they were used minimally, okay? And from my perspective, shall I say, I'm over the moon with how it looks and how it actually sounds and how it's going to perform as well. So no issues with regards to the windows, no issues getting to the post screen whatsoever. And I did promise that we would do a few benchmarks with regards to PUBG, some Apex, etc. And I've not managed to find time to download Warzone, guys, 176 gig or whatever it is. So I just wanted to give you an indication of what you can come to expect if you are looking to actually get a 1060 in 2022 with a 10500. Let's jump into some benchmarks and then we can show you what it's capable of. So we'll start off with some Apex, guys. In terms of settings, we have got 16:9, 1080p, 110 FPS. We've turned off VSync. We've got NVIDIA Reflex with enabled and boost. We've got competitive settings, if you like. So nothing too extravagant in terms of qualities. So let's give this a go. Let's just go for a trios game. I've not played this game in about 3 months. And bear in mind, I'm an old man. I'm not wearing a headset either. I just wanted to do it for demonstration purposes. We'll just choose anybody. Let's go. They're going to be talking to me like, what's he doing? Why is he not talking? Where's he going? We'll just follow these and then we'll drop wherever they drop. I just want a quick indication. So as you can see here, we're currently getting about 77, 78 FPS in the ship before we drop. GPU's at 55 degrees and our CPU is somewhere between 40 and 45 degrees. So 27% utilization as well. And obviously GPU's at 95%. So this is not using MSI, so we've got no overclocks. So you would be able to get a little bit more out of this by increasing the memory and increasing the power limits. That's how long I've not played this game for. I don't even know what this gun is. But as you can see, we're getting now when we're on the floor, not engaged or anything like that, but it's around 140 FPS, average 140. Just get a fight and let's die. Oh, we're getting shot. Can't hear anything. Oh, great. Oh, we knocked one. Oh, we knocked another. Lucky. Oh, no, he's above me. Holy blooming Nora. Sliding rhymer. So, there we go. Die in the worst fashion ever. We averaged 139 according to this. What we'll do now is we'll jump into a game of PUBG and just see how that fares. So we are running stock on this 1066 gig. If you wanted to each a little bit more performance out of this card, then you could do that just by obviously increasing the core clock and memory clock till a point which is stable. As you can see, guys, we've not played it. I very, very rarely get chance to play any games nowadays with work and with YouTube. Used to play a lot of PUBG back in the day, but unfortunately not the case anymore. But let's jump into a game. So let's just have a look at some settings here. FOV 103. Anti-aliasing, yeah, let's leave that there. Textures, medium. Effects, we always want very low. Foliage, we want mega low. View distance makes no difference whatsoever. Sharpen we have on. VSync we disable. Motion blur disable. DirectX 11. Nice. Because we have view distance set to low, the things don't actually render in till a little bit later. So it wasn't too bad. It was about 220 in the plane. And now we're down to around 130, 140. Let's see what it's like when we get on the ground. Top 10, baby! So we've been averaging around 150 FPS in PUBG, guys. 1080p, comp settings, 103 FOV. So not too bad at all. We'll just play this one out. I don't have very high hopes, and there's none of my keyboard settings on this, but we have managed to make it to top 10, which is good. I've got no headset on again, so I don't envisage doing a great deal, to be honest. I don't know what on earth's going on with my settings, but I'm having to click to ADS instead of hold, which is weird. Oh my god, I'm going to die. It's on hold. I don't understand why it's doing stupid stuff like that. Top 5. Nice kill. Don't know what he was doing like. Running around like a zombie. Just seen someone getting shot up here. What? One v one. Dun dun dun. Oh my god. So there you go, guys. It says average FPS 179 at 1080p in PUBG. Let's jump back to final thoughts. And there we have it, guys. Another PC all done. I'm hoping that you've seen from them actual benchmarks that this is a very, very capable machine, especially considering that we only spent £650. Yes, the GPU and CPU are used, and that 1060 and 10500 are fantastic. You've seen in the benchmarks they don't bottleneck each other, and they complement each other really, really well. Considering the rest of the parts that we've put into this system, I think it offers insane value for money, and the performance that you can get out of it, I wouldn't consider as an entry-level PC. As we said previously, very well and very good to upgrade this particular PC, and you can grow with it. And over the next couple of years, if you want to actually install a new CPU or a GPU, you can easily do that, and it will complement the rest of the parts. As we said previously, the gameplay at the end, is that something that you guys would like to see more of at the end of these PC builds, just to see what and how it actually performs? If so, let me know down below in the comments. That's something that we can actually take on board and I can implement into future videos, no problem at all. Before we actually go, guys, please, please, please don't forget to smash that subscriber button. We've recently passed 2,000 subscribers, all down to you. So I really, really thank you so, so much. Leave a like so our videos can get out there and to the greater masses. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Take care, enjoy your weekend. I'll see you in the next one.